Well, welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs 2021, and we continue to stream more stories of business, entrepreneurship, and how to deal with this very new evolving economy in different ways. As anyone who has followed Radio Entrepreneurs knows that every week we try to speak with our litigation reporter, Mark Furman from the law firm of Tarlow, Hart, and Rodgers. Welcome back, Mark. Nice to see you good and healthy and very comfortably dressed like me.
You're very well dressed as always, Jeffrey. Great to be with you.
Well, Mark, I know we have two important topics today for our listeners that should help us. But the first of all, we're not going to talk about Georgia pizzas. We're going to talk about impeachment, correct?
Yes. President Trump was impeached, which really means he has been charged by the House of Representatives with high crimes and misdemeanors relating to the January 6 events that led to the Capitol being invaded and all of that. And so the next step, of course, is a trial in the Senate. It's not really a legal trial, although it's presided by the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. It's a political trial, and it takes 2/3 to have him convicted. And if he is convicted, then by a majority vote, he can be barred from running for office in the future.
And that's probably what they're really working towards, correct?
I think that's really it. But there is a real jurisdictional question, which is, can you remove a president, convict him or her after they have left office? Is that allowed under the Constitution? So it's an interesting political middle ground for Republicans who feel that what he did was terribly wrong, but they don't want to totally upset his strong base of supporters. So they take the position, we don't have jurisdiction under the Constitution. And, the senators can vote for whatever reason they want. And so if you don't get 2/3 because enough Republicans say there's no jurisdiction, it's not like you can appeal that. That will be the end of it. On the other hand, if there is a vote to convict, that's a live issue that he could take to the United States Supreme Court, I think, whether there is jurisdiction. There's no real binding precedent. I mean, there has been a trial in the Senate after people resign from office, but is it legally controlling? So, but people shouldn't think of it as a trial in the legal sense, but it is a political trial. Another issue that came up as a result of what happened on January 6th, of course, is, okay, you're the owner of a company, and you find that employees were down there, and there were people who were down there protesting, and then there were people down there protesting who forcibly entered the Capitol building. And some of those people engaged in assault. Some of those people engaged in destruction of property.
Theft of property. They stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop.
Right.
Wow.
So you have to think there's government secrets on there, right?
It's not a paperweight.
It's not a paperweight. So, so what do you do? So I think the balance here is people's right to free speech versus the fact that most employees are employees at will, who can be terminated for no reason or for any reason, as long as it's not a discriminatory reason. But, for the people engaged in criminal trespass, criminal destruction of property, assault, that's not the exercise of free speech rights. And the First Amendment, which guarantees the right of free speech, actually applies for the most part to government action. But you do have a little bit of a question about, whether you're an employer in Massachusetts, where our civil rights law doesn't require action by the state or the government, whether you're interfering with free speech rights if you just don't like the politics of it. And so that's a little bit more questionable. But I mean, what the images that we saw were so disconcerting, nothing like I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I know that I'm a lot older than you, Jeffrey, but it's, really scary stuff. And
We never expected it. This is not the type of stuff. Maybe we grew up naive that we ever expected in this country. It was sort of a beacon of freedom and democracy, a model.
yes, and I mean, I hope we can get back to the point where there's some greater shared sense of what's fact and what's fiction. And, it'll also be interesting to see. I know there's a lot of talk about, what the president said and whether he crossed the line in what he said. But what about Rudy Giuliani with it's time for trial by combat?
And I'll ask you something else, because there's other information that's going to come out. And we've covered two topics so far. There are, and I'm sure some people who were very vocal have become very quiet recently within the Senate or the Congress. And there's been talk of conspirators inside the Congress or the Senate. And, some people could guess who some of those people are who were very vocal, who have become very quiet all of a sudden, who might have been giving tours inappropriately the day before when you're not supposed to, been texting to agitate them. What happens to them? Could they be convicted as well? I don't know. You haven't prepared for this one, but I won't mention names because I don't want to get in trouble. But I mean, there's certain people I think of in particular who are extremely vocal in support of this whole process.
Yeah.
If they're found out to be conspirators in this process, is there
They
liability?
can be, they can be both criminally prosecuted and removed from office. I mean, you don't have the immunity because you're a member of Congress. There have been many members of Congress who've been charged with crimes, and whether it's bribery or sexual assault, and those. So there's no immunity. The president has immunity while the president serves in his or her capacity as president. But once they leave office, they lose that immunity, and they can be criminally prosecuted. Because our system of justice, it's a heavy burden of showing guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's
my fourth question as I finish the last one, because back to my last question, I think of two male members and one female member of elected officials that were probably thinking politically that they wanted to be the heir apparent to Trump's voter base. So they rode that train thinking it was a political opportunity. And now this could be their own political demise if they were too actively involved in running that base. So, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So why do the impeachment in the first place? Going back to my fourth question, why don't they just wait until President Trump, maybe this is part of the strategy to keep him occupied, keep him, wait till he's out of office and then take criminal activity against him when he's out of office, which I know there's already cases in New York State that he can't stop. So he has potentially the next few years of political problems and also economic problems due to corporate funding pullback on his private businesses.
Well, from what I've read, he's got a bunch of loans that are coming due, and the willingness of lenders to lend money to him and his organization, to refinance debt, to extend debt, that'll be an important issue. The reputational hit of the Trump organization. We'll see how that impacts them. But I think, as I read, they have hundreds of millions of dollars of debt that's coming due. So that's one factor. I think in New York, there's an investigation going on. There hasn't been any indictments. And, they've been fighting about the tax returns that he's declined to release. And they're still fighting about that. And then I think the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. is investigating every aspect of what happened January 6th. A lot of people have been charged. And I don't know whether President Trump, his sons, Rudy Giuliani, members of Congress, I think over time, we're going to learn more details about these tours of Congress during a time when tours, from what I've read, weren't really happening because of the pandemic. And who was on those tours, who was guiding the tours, where did they go, in what proximity to the events on January 6th were there. There's the aspect of the organizational, how organized the forcible entry into the Capitol was, where media has talked about how, they went in using a military formation that is commonly used to during an attack to gain entry. I mean, I think all this information is going to come to light. And
I think we're going to be hearing about it for years. It's going to be books and movies and lots of trials, but there's going to be, there's going to be a legacy here that's going to go on for a long time.
And we have,
just like,
I was just going to say, we have a lot of people who do not recognize President-elect Biden as a legitimate elected president. And despite the fact that it's been litigated across the country and the cases have been rejected by judges pretty uniformly, including by Trump appointees, and you have Republican election officials in Republican-controlled states who have said there was no fraud that would have made a difference in the outcome. But it's the perception of reality. I remember when I first heard the term alternative facts early in the Trump presidency. That's where we're living, that people can seem to be able to have their own set of facts. And as a lawyer, I think of it as, what's the evidence? What's the proof?
That's clearly what these Republican judges wanted to see. They were still judges.
Yes. And if they thought that the election was rigged, I think they would have felt it was their obligation to take action to make sure people's right to vote, constitutional right to vote, was protected, and that, but, unfortunately, conspiracy theories are everywhere now, and social media has made it easier and easier to communicate conspiracy theories without evidence. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. Scary time for us as a country.
It's also interesting, maybe we can talk about it in another interview, what social media can and cannot allow to go out online, because now social media, all of a sudden, 6 years into the Trump era, because I think it started, before he was president, they're now shutting down these false messages that I've seen a lot of false messages from both sides, to be diplomatic. And all of a sudden, social media's got a conscience. How far can they go? Will they continue to go down this road, or will it just be a new message that they're out to get Donald Trump and he'll just develop his own medium? But we can talk about that maybe in another interview.
Good subject. One thing that the Republicans and Democrats seem to agree on, the need to look at social media and the power that the big tech companies have over the messages that are allowed to be heard, and the liability shields that they have. So that's going to be a hot political debate.
I don't use my social media as a political platform. I usually use it as a leg platform. On the weekend, I posted a video of my blow drying my dog's hair, so his ears were fluffing up like Dumbo the elephant. So I think social media, I try to use it for what it was intended to be, something, just messages to my friends. But Mark, great having you on. Great seeing you still healthy and vibrant.
Doing the best we can.
If someone wants to find you at Tarlow, Hart, and Rodgers, how would they find you?
Send me an email, mfurman, Furman, at tbhr-law.com. My direct line at work is 617-218-2025.
And for those who like following Mark Furman and maybe Mark Z as well, we're going to be starting a new panel segment in 2021, litigation in a Zoom world. And Mark is going to be one of our panelists. So look forward to that. And I think that's something that affects all of our clients and listeners on Radio Entrepreneurs. So stay tuned to Radio Entrepreneurs.